Hey friend, I'm Nathan Littleton. Welcome to the Firm My Life coaching program. Over the next few months, I want to be your coach. And together, we're going to walk down a journey towards a life that is strong, that is stable, and that is full of purpose. We're going to build a foundation in your life, a foundation that will stand up against the storms that life brings. We're going to build a foundation that really, I like to think of it as a launch pad. It's going to be a place that you can launch a rocket off of, right? That you can go and you can become something amazing, something great in your life. Now look, I want to say props to you. I know too many people who stay stuck in a bad job, a bad career, a bad relationship, just a bad life, because they will not take the initiative to change. They will not put forth the work and the effort that it requires to grow, to learn, to become better. So props to you. Like, reach back, give yourself a big pat on the back. Seriously, you deserve it. You're a rock star. So here's what I want to do today. This introductory video here, it's really one to, introduce myself, which I think I did, but it's also, I want to share a little bit of my story because there's a couple of mindsets, there's a couple things, little nuggets here that I'm going to pull out for you that is absolutely critical that you grab a hold of. Because these two things, it's what's going to ensure the success of this program, of this journey that we're going to walk on. All right, so let me share some things with you. So I remember when I was a kid, I grew up in a very hardworking family. Like, we worked for everything that we had. And so when I turned 16 years old, my dad went and bought me a pickup truck that was totaled out. This was my very first truck. Now, this truck, I'm telling you, it was wrecked. You see, the grill and the headlights, they were in the engine. Like, the hood was in the windshield. And I remember that as I grew up on a little farm, and we had an old farm shop out back that my grandpa had, and I remember pulling up to the door to pull that thing in there, and the problem is there was no room. I mean, this huge, massive shop, and there's no room for this truck. So I go in there, and me and my grandpa began cleaning out. You see, he was one of them old farmers that just hoarded everything. So we brought some shelves in, and we began to organize and clean things up, and half the stuff had been in there for 30, 40 years, and so we brought the dumpster and slid it in the door, and I began to throw stuff away when his back was turned. Well, then he would come back around when I wasn't looking and start pulling stuff back out of the dumpster. So the thing was, eventually we got enough room in there that I was able to pull that truck in, and I began to pull off all them parts, began to rebuild some things that was busted on the engine, and I went to a wrecking yard and got new parts, and I began to put it all together, bought a paint gun and painted it, and it turned out really nice, and I was very proud of it. And actually, I took my wife on our very first official date in that pickup truck. The thing was, I liked it so much that I ended up selling the truck and buying another wrecked one, and I rebuilt it, and I sold it, and back and forth. I did that several times, and when I was 17, I got my used car dealer license in my dad's name. And there I was, I kind of was, I guess you could say I was in business, but it wasn't a real business. At least in my mind, it wasn't. And so I had a dream that one day I was going to be a real businessman. And I wanted to own a body shop. So at 19, I went and I rented a building and I cleaned it up. It was a rundown building. It was rusted out around the bottom. And, I began to clean that thing up and replace some of the sheet metal. And I made it work. And I started business. I put me a little office up towards the front, up close to the road that customers could come in. And I put my wife in there as a secretary. And I was in the back fixing all the cars. Finally, I was a big businessman. Like, I had this dream, I was going to be making millions of dollars, and I was going to have all these employees, and I was going to drive around in a big jacked up diesel truck because that's what all the businessmen drive in East Texas where I grew up. Well, the thing was, I didn't know that it required a lot more than hard work and ambition to run a business. Like, You needed some wisdom, some knowledge, some ability to make good financial decisions, and all these things that I didn't have. I just jumped in there and went after it. Well, it caught up to me. And it really started happening when the first time the Snap-on truck showed up. Now, if you've ever been in a Snap-on truck, I'm telling you, it is like a Bass Pro Shop to a fisherman or Target to my wife, right? Like, there's tools in there everywhere. Like, there's even tools on the ceiling. So, man, I went in there and I began to look around and I realized that these tools were very, very expensive. But they'll sell them to you on credit, no interest. They'll just come by every week and get a little piece of your check. So I spent a few $100s and it wasn't long, and they sent the big Snap-on truck by. I guess those guys know a sucker when they see a sucker. I don't know. But they knew this guy is young, he's dumb, he's going to spend a lot of money. So that truck pulled up, and I'm telling you, when you walk in that truck, I mean, it is unbelievable. Like, they have all these big tools. They got the welders, the tire tools, the AC machines, on and on. And they have it set up so that you can demo them all. So I go in there and I'm welding a little bit and I'm looking at all these different things, and the guy was like, "Man, you need a welder, don't you?" I'm like, "Man, I do. I've got a cheap one and we don't work real good." So remember I asked him, I was like, "Man, does this thing weld aluminum?" He's like, "Yeah, man, that welds aluminum." I just thought, wow, all these cars nowadays are going to aluminum. If I had this welder, man, I'd get a heads up on my competition. I'd get a lot more work. That sounds like a smart decision. 15 grand? Yeah, I can pay for that. 20-something%, I think it was close to 30% interest. Don't matter. I've been making so much money off of it, who cares? Well, I turned around and there was an AC machine. And I convinced myself I needed that too. So $30,000 later, at close to a 30% interest, I walked off that truck, a proud owner of 2 big pieces of equipment. Well, it didn't stop there. I remember I had a guy come by and he was going to sell me a sign. Because he told me, he said, "Hey man, you need a sign to go out front. Like, if you had this big nice LED sign, everybody driving by here would stop in. Like, man, you would have so much work you wouldn't know what to do with it." And I was like, "Man, you're right. So I remember my office had 2 rooms in it. And I was talking to him in the front office, and my wife was over in the side room. And I remember walking there, and I was like, "Hey, babe, what do you think about this?" And she was like, "Do not do this. This guy is shady. I don't trust him. He's trying to rip you off. You don't need this sign." And I'm like, "Woman, I'm the businessman. You don't know what you're talking about." So I walked in there, and I was like, "Yeah, man, how much?" And he's like, $8,000, man, and we'll get it sent to you. And you can pay it out $250 a month. You're good. So I was like, "Okay, we'll do that." So he fills out the paperwork, and he fills in all the lines. You're going to pay this much for this many months and all that. And he was like, "Man, we don't finance in-house. It's all going to go to a credit company that's going to hold the note." It's like, "Okay, no problem." So we got it all done, and he left, and it was, I think, a day or 2 later. I started looking at that paperwork, and I was like, "Man, this math don't add up." And when I added up the months and the payment, it was like $14,000. So I called the company, and they're like, or actually I called him first, couldn't get a hold of him, so I called his company. They answered, and I was like, "Hey man, this guy told me it's going to be 8 grand. It's 14 grand. What's up here? I need to talk." And they're like, "I don't know. You'd have to talk to him." I was like, "Well, I can't get a hold of him." Well, the line goes silent. And after a few minutes, they're like, "Yeah, we can't get a hold of him either. We don't know where he's at." I'm like, "Do what?" They're like, "Yeah, you're going to have to call the finance company. We don't finance in-house." I was like, yeah, he told me. So I called them, and they were a legit finance company, and they was like, "Man, this is just what you owe. This is what you signed." So I did end up getting my sign. I way overpaid for it. But I wonder if the hardest part was that my wife was right and I was wrong. Right, I learned that lesson. Well, after the Snap-on trucks and the sign, man, I began to use credit cards. I went and I got a line of credit at the bank. I ended up buying the building, so I had that mortgage. I ended up with a mortgage on my home. I had cars that I had notes on, and it just kept going and kept going. But I decided, you know what, even though I'm barely breaking even and mostly I'm in the red, I'm not a real businessman until I have employees. So I went and promised some guys the world. They quit their job to come work for me. And by that time, it was catching up with me. And when you begin, actually, we had 2 kids by then, me and my wife. And so here we are a few years into this, and I didn't have the money to buy groceries. I no longer had the money to pay the electric bill. And there I was, have these 2 babies, and I can't provide. And every month I'm going further and further and further in the hole. And just the stress, the anxiety that began to come over my life. I began to work 16, 18, 20-hour days. I would work and work, come home, barely sleep, go back to work. I was doing everything I could to make it work, to make it happen, but it wasn't. And I remember pulling up to a red light, and in my truck, it was one day, and I was in my mind, I'm telling you, I was having these panic attacks, and I had all these battles in my mind going on, and I was so afraid that all of this was fixing to crash in on me. And I remember thinking, I said, you know what? A good captain goes down with his ship, so I'm just going to ride this thing all the way to the bottom. And that's exactly what I did. And it all folded in on me. And I'll never forget the day that I walked into the shop and told the guys, I said, look, I'm so sorry, but this is the last day you have a job. I'm done. And that day, my dream died. And because I grew up the way I did, just my identity was wrapped around my job, my career, my ability as a man, I felt like, to provide. And when it all fell in, I felt so worthless. I felt so hopeless. I felt something inside of me just shrivel up and die. And on top of that, me and my wife had grew up in a very legalistic church. And we were just really processing a lot of things with that, and we were beginning to doubt a lot of the things we had been taught and question all these different things. And that is a whole nother mind battle in its own. And through that, and then through losing my shop, my faith just began to crumble. My belief in God, that He cared about me, that He loved me, that He really knew me, that it just began to shake and it began to fall apart. And I tell you, I hit the bottom that day, that season, really, when I felt like I would never get up, like I would never make it. I felt like a complete failure. And I remember I began to just spend some time alone with God and my thoughts, just trying to cipher through all the noise, just cipher through the mind battles, cipher through the voices in my head, and try to find a reason, try to find a path forward, try to find some purpose in my life. I began to walk down dirt roads. I began to walk down old deer trails in the woods, and I was just searching for answers in my life. Now listen, I don't know where you're at in your life right now. I don't know what you're going through. But I know that you're here. And I know that you came here because you're searching for something. You're searching for more in your life. You're searching for answers to problems. And I want you to know that you can find them. You can find hope in your situation. Because that's what I found that day. In those woods, as I began to walk and pray and talk, something inside of me began to come alive. It was as if a flame sparked inside of me. A little flame, a little flicker that said, maybe I am enough. Maybe I can overcome this. Maybe I can be more than just a failure. Maybe there's more inside of me. Maybe God really does have a purpose for my life. Hope. Hope that there was more. Look, I don't know if you realize it or not, but that hope is alive inside of you. I know you have it because you're spending your time, your money to go through this process. You've got to grab a hold of hope. Here's the thing. I told you that story for this right here. I want you to grasp a hold of this because you've got to understand You've got to allow hope to spark a desire to change. Hope to begin to build something inside of you that says, my situation can be different and will be different. Things are going to take a turn. Goodness is going to come into my life. Progress is going to be made. You've got to grasp a hold of that. Jesus said that all things are possible for those who believe. You've got to grab a hold of some faith, some belief that there's more in your life. No matter what your life looks like right now, no matter what you're facing, no matter what you're going through, whether you're on the very bottom, as I was that day, you got to get a hold of some hope. Now, after that was all said and done, and I got a hold of that hope, and I began to try to go forward. I remember I ended up with a little job that I was able to buy groceries and just kind of keep the lights on and, buy diapers and stuff for my kids. And I remember I was driving to work one day, and a podcast came on I was listening to, and this guy came on, and he said these words. He said, "No one is coming to save you. Your life is your responsibility." No one is coming to save you. Your life is your responsibility. I'm telling you, those words hit me like a ton of bricks because I realized at that moment, yes, I had hope that things would change, but I realized that I had to stop pointing fingers at other people, pointing fingers at outside circumstances. I had to quit playing the blame game and accept responsibility for my own life. There were some things that I knew I was going to have to overcome. I had a mountain of debt left over from the business. Like I had such a inferiority complex. I was dealing with such low self-confidence, such bad mindsets, such a broken view of God and religion and faith and relationships and all that. Like there was so much going on in my life, but I knew I had to accept responsibility for me. And so that's when I decided I'm going to play the cards that life has dealt. So this is the other thing that you've got to grasp a hold of. The first one is hope. But the second one is this idea that change is going to happen when you decide to make change happen. Hope says change can happen, but now you're going to have to allow that hope to bring about action so that you begin to move forward. You're going to have to take a look at the cards that life has dealt you, the good, the bad, the ugly, and you're going to come to a place that says, no matter what happens, no matter what I have to do, no matter how long it takes, I am going to accept responsibility for my life. I'm going to move forward. I'm not going to blame others. I'm not even going to blame myself because blame, it really doesn't matter. It doesn't matter whose fault it is. It's my life. So I have to do something about it. And I'm going to push all of that doubt, that fear, that insecurity. I'm going to push all that stuff back, and I'm going to make a choice to accept responsibility for my life, and I'm going to move forward. Now, when you get to that place, my friend, now we can begin this journey. We can go forward and build this life that you're looking for. I can't wait to get started. I'm going to see you in the next video, and we're going to dive straight in. And I'm telling you, it's going to be amazing. I can't wait to see what God does with your life through the Firm My Life coaching program. All right, see you guys on the inside.